Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Like many people, I decided to see what was on the dark web and see what was actually on there. I watched some videos and read some guides on how to do it safely. I heard rumors of people getting their computers hacked and also messed with. Not to mention some other people who had far, far worse fates happen to them. It was difficult to determine which of these stories was fact and which were fiction. I guess people who frequented the dark web would have been more aware of what was going on to begin with. I used one of my older laptops that I didn't care about if it got damaged. I wiped it off of all personal information and files that could cause issues if someone got their hands on it. I guess if something ended up messing with the laptop, I would just have an old outdated paperweight that I could always get rid of and forget about it. I downloaded the Tor browser, and the thing I hated the most was how slow it was. I nearly lost interest with that alone. A lot of sites wouldn't load, and when they did, they weren't all that great to look at. Most of them looked so damn old, and I was left feeling so underwhelmed. I was reminded of sites that I saw from the 90s. I saw so many videos on YouTube about the dark web, and I felt incredibly frustrated about it. I didn't know what I was looking for specifically. I heard some people stumbled on some absolutely vile content, but I didn't want to do that. I also wasn't really interested in drugs or anything. I wanted to see weird, but mostly harmless things. I guess I should have done that on the dark web. I was curious about the different cults and things. I liked checking out this sort of thing, guilty pleasure and all of that. And after clicking on several dead links, I finally found one that looked pretty good. I didn't know if I should name the site, especially with what they know about me, but everyone on the page was smiling. It was probably a generic stock image. They spoke about being happy or happiness, a world without money or stress of a 9-to-5 job where everyone was equal and treated well. All things that should be the case, but was usually wrapped up with one psycho or another. I kept scrolling. The site looked like it was made in the early 2000s. It was gaudy and slow, and it being on the dark web didn't help either. I hate to say it, but a part of me wants to know more about the cult. Who they were, how they managed to get members. Why did they decide to post it on the dark web instead? I've never heard of them before, so I thought that maybe I could Google them. When I searched them, I found absolutely nothing. There was always a chance it was an elaborate prank played by some teenager wanting to get a rise out of people. I pondered making a YouTube video on it, maybe a series. It was a way that I could have earned some money in the future. So, I used my phone to record and document what I was finding. I used a Proton Mail email account to avoid using my real one, and I told them that I had some questions. I didn't know why I was doing this, and over time, checking the site and seeing if there were any updates too became an addiction. It was like living a double life. On one hand, I was a devout member of this cult, reading and learning about the teachings and learning more about the members, while on the other hand, I was going to school and living a normal life. One of my friends asked what I was doing, and I went into vivid detail about it. We laughed about it. And one of the emails I received from my next learning instructions, I wasn't surprised by it. It was all the same talk of helping us grow as brothers, repent, acknowledge the divine leader, and all that sort of thing. The topics of the emails blurred into each other by this point. And at the end, it was signed with my name and not the alias that I used when I contacted the site. And by then, I decided that that was enough snooping on these sites. Every so often, I receive an email from the cult. They will mention something small about me. And after a month, I decided to just let the email die. I don't want to deal with it anymore. I'm scared at some point that the cult will try to reach out to me in the real world. So far, nothing has happened, and I'm worried that they will contact people in my real life. Please, does anyone have any advice for me? My mother and father were killed in a terrible car accident when I was just 6 years old. Since then, I have been raised by my aunt and uncle in Texas, along with my older cousin. It took me a while to adjust to this new arrangement, but in time, I came to accept my aunt and uncle as my parental figures. But the person that I was closest with was my cousin Lacey, but we were more like brother and sister. Living in Texas, we often went hunting and fishing. My uncle taught us both to be expert marksmen when it came to hog hunting. This comes in handy in the southern United States, where these wild pigs are considered pests due to their effect on the ecosystem. And by the time that I was 13, I had become a terrific shooter. My uncle sometimes joked that I would become a police sniper. Over time, my cousin and I both developed an interest in computers. This was in the late 90s and early 2000s, when the internet was a much newer phenomenon and the idea of an information superhighway was very fascinating to both of us. Lacey is 2 years older than me and thus graduated high school sooner. She was accepted into the University of Texas with a scholarship in computer sciences. As for me, my initial enthusiasm in computers has since waned into casual interest. My ultimate passion was in sports journalism, and I would end up attending the University of Southern California with a scholarship in that field. In the summer of 2006, I finished my sophomore year while Lacey had graduated from college and was now working for a large technical firm in Houston. It was a summer break, and I hadn't seen her in a while, so I flew into town to visit for a few days. After spending a couple of hours catching up, she brought up a subject that has since come back to haunt me. She referred to it as the dark web. One of her co-workers had been bragging about spending time there, claiming to have purchased drugs on numerous occasions, and also watching some very hardcore videos that cannot be found anywhere on the regular internet. Lacey learned that this part of the web could only be accessed if you were a really good hacker. This predated Tor software by several years. Hacking had become a hobby of hers, and she decided to check it out. I figured, what the hell, right? What could be so bad about this dark web? Well, plenty, as it would turn out. As we went browsing, we both lost count of how many hitman advertisements, drug dealers, and animal torture videos we saw. Some videos were live streams of what seemed to be genuine rapes, which caused both of us to cringe. We even saw things like crush porn. Apparently, there are people out there who are sexually aroused at the sight of baby animals being crushed under stiletto heels. But despite all of these horrors, Lacey had a strange fascination with this place, but I had already lost interest. Eventually, she came across a link entitled TJ's Horror Shop. It sounded corny as hell, but Lacey clicked on it anyway. She was greeted by a message informing her that a show was going to be taking place that night, but it was members only. The page gave her the option of registering, and she did just that. Southern Nerd 04 was the username she chose, if I remember correctly, and the website accepted her registration. She seemed eager to see what this was all about, but I felt very uneasy. From what I had seen so far, these people on the dark web are the type who hide their true colors, and I didn't want to see Lacey associating with people like that. After her registration went through, we were greeted by a digital clock gradually counting down to the beginning of the live stream. It felt like an eternity, but the clock eventually reached 0 and the screen lit up. We saw a man wearing a skull mask. He had skeleton gloves and dressed in leather. He was twiddling his fingers like Mr. Burns, and we heard him speak in a deep, distorted voice. "Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to TJ's Horror Shop. For all the newcomers, it is my pleasure to welcome you into my house of horrors." It seemed like a silly little show, but given everything else that we had seen on the dark web, I wasn't convinced that something truly sinister was out of the question. Tonight's first victim. 2 other men, who were also wearing masks and dressed in leather, dragged a third person in front of the camera. His hands were tied behind his back, and there was a bag over his head like he was some kind of hostage. Andrew Fleming of Charlotte, North Carolina, 43 years old, divorced, father of a son and a daughter, and he has been selected as the first victim of tonight's bloodbath. I began feeling sick to my stomach, and I noticed Lacey was beginning to look nervous. For those of you who are new, my viewers are the ones who get to pick how our victims meet their demise. Your username is selected at random, and after your name is chosen, a box will appear on your screen to offer you several choices. The option you select is the method in which this poor bastard will die. One of the henchmen ripped the bag off the hostage's head. The man was sobbing in terror and was pathetically begging for his life. I sincerely hoped this was all just an act, but I was becoming more and more convinced otherwise. And now, let the selection process begin. On the left side of the screen, all the usernames of those watching began to briefly flash up at random. Some kind of algorithm was using some sort of lottery system to select who would determine this man's fate. Eventually, it settled on the username, Who Gives a Shit 771. Who Gives a Shit 771, one of our favorite guests, TJ shouted in glee. How will Mr. Fleming's life come to a horrifying end? Let's find out. A box appeared that showed the following options. A. Strangulation. B. Mutilation by chainsaw. And C. Repeated gunshots. The user chose the third option. Very well. Let the carnage begin. One of the masked henchmen appeared from off the screen, armed with a sawed-off shotgun. He aimed at the man's genitalia and fired. Lacey and I both gasped in shock and horror, while Mr. Fleming howled in extreme agony. The henchman lifted the man up and shot him in both his kneecaps, causing him to drop back down to the floor and continue begging for mercy. His pleas fell off in deaf ears. The henchman then took out a 9mm pistol and emptied the entire clip into his back. I couldn't bear to watch anymore. I looked away from the computer and I lost my lunch. I heard one more gunshot, and the man screaming stopped. What a delightfully gruesome display. Now, on to our next guest. The other guys dragged another hostage into view, also bound with a bag over their head. The bag was removed to reveal a young woman not much older than me. Melissa Cartwright of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 24 years old and single. You will be our next victim. Now, let's see who decides your fate. As before, the slot at the left of the screen began flashing usernames at random, and much to our horror, it settled on the username Lacey had chosen. And tears began welling up in her eyes. "Lacey, shut this damn thing off!" I shouted. "Southern Nerd 04, a newcomer. We are happy to welcome you into our gruesome family. Now, you must choose how Miss Cartwright dies." The small box reappeared with several different options than before: flaying, electrocution, or incineration. And Lacey sat frozen. "Lacey, get off this page now!" I said with a mixture of fear and anger. Several minutes passed, and TJ had grown impatient. "Well, Southern Nerd, we are waiting!" Lacey began frantically pressing buttons, hoping to escape from this awful place. "If you don't choose in the next 20 seconds, you will be on our next show," TJ said menacingly. And for a moment, Lacey appeared to be considering one of the murder options, but before she could choose, I ripped the power cord from this outlet and shut the damn computer off. Lacey broke down sobbing while I rushed over to comfort her. You don't think they'll find me, do you?" she said fearfully. I don't know." I stayed with Lacey a few more days before flying back to Los Angeles. To be honest, I wanted classes to resume, but it was the middle of July. The whole situation with those wackos on the dark web appeared to have blown over. Or so I thought. Wednesday, July 19, 2006, 10:47 p.m. I returned to my apartment and flopped down on my bed. I opened up my laptop, and I was met with a horrifying sight. My generic desktop background had been replaced with an image of a skull mask, the same type of mask worn by TJ and his cronies in that terrible livestream. A video box appeared and a video message began to play. "Hello there, Jason. It's me, TJ." Shivers went down my spine. How did he learn my name? How the hell did he hack into my laptop? "I believe we have a hostage here that might be of interest to you." The camera angle changed to reveal. No, it can't be. Lacey! She was bound and gagged and sobbing in the corner of the room where TJ was filming, and there were cuts and bruises on her face. "Remember when I told you your cousin here that she would be part of our next show? I'm a man of my word, Jason. She had a choice, and she refused to answer the call. And now, she will pay the ultimate price." He bent down and pet her hair very creepily. Or will she? I sat motionless, waiting to hear what he would say next. "I've decided to make things interesting for our next show. Your cousin will have a chance to survive if, and only if, you eliminate this man." A photograph of a middle-aged man appeared on my screen. Raymond Marshall, 53 years old, of Los Angeles, California. No particular reason why I chose this random person, except for the fact that he happens to live near you. And now, you have a simple choice. Will you murder one person to potentially save another? I stared at my laptop, unable to move or speak. I wanted to save Lacey, but was it worth murdering another innocent person? 20 seconds, Jason. Tick tock, tick tock. I heard TJ taunting. Not much time to consider things, a very awful predicament to be in, and TJ began to count down out loud. 10, 9, 8, 7. Yes, I will do it. I finally managed to force out, and I regretted it almost instantly. So, you've agreed to play along. Very well then. You have until the end of our show tonight to carry this out, which will be in a couple of hours. Be warned, one of my henchmen is currently in Los Angeles, and he's watching your every move. You know, in case you try to chicken out. Oh, and we are also monitoring your communications, so don't even think about warning your target or calling the police. I was trapped. There was no way out of this. I would have to become a murderer if Lacey was going to live, and the thought of it sickened me. If you haven't eliminated your target in 2 hours, my henchman will kill you. Shouldn't be a problem. Your cousin tells me you're an excellent shooter. TJ sent me his address. My target is a 15-minute drive away. A part of me wanted to commit suicide right then and there, but I knew that would be viewed as chickening out, and that would surely get Lacey killed. No, I had to do this. I took a quick shower, then I went to the apartment building's parking garage. I took my laptop with me. I opened up the toolbox in the bed of my pickup truck, and I pulled out my hunting rifle. I stared quietly at the weapon. I brought it with me when I drove out to California 2 years ago. I had used it many times for hog hunting, but I hadn't had much time for hunting much of anything since I moved here. However, I had cleaned it recently, and I had plenty of ammunition, and I tossed the rifle into the back seat of my truck. "Put this on," I heard a voice say. Startled, I turned around and saw a tall man in a hooded sweatshirt wearing a skull mask. "Let me guess, you're that psychopath's puppet," I said sarcastically. "Put this on," he repeated in a more aggressive tone. He was holding a headset in his outstretched hand, and I took it from him. This headset has a small camera planted inside. It will provide visual confirmation that you have carried out your task. Any attempt to tamper with it, and I will kill you. They had all their bases covered. "Such a lovely crowd you hang out with," I said as I climbed into my truck. I saw him turn around and walk away. I couldn't see him or his vehicle anywhere in sight, and with that, I started the ignition and I began driving to the address that TJ had sent me. All the while, I saw a dark SUV with tinted windows tailing me the whole way. I tried to make out a license plate, but it was late at night and I couldn't see it. I eventually arrived at the street where my intended target lived. His house was directly across the street from a park, and I decided that it would be easier to hide from my target if I parked my truck over there. And meanwhile, the SUV that had been tailing me made a sharp U-turn, and parked itself on the other side of the street. They weren't kidding that they were watching my every move. I opened up my laptop and waited for a video box to appear on the desktop, which is how TJ said that he would contact me when they neared the end of their disgusting little show. At about 1:20 a.m., that's exactly what happened. Welcome back again, loyal viewers. We have had quite an entertaining show so far tonight, but we've got quite a finale in store for you. He went off camera and dragged a woman in front of it, hands tied and mouth covered in duct tape. It was Lacey. Will a man end one person's life to possibly save another? Let's find out. Off to Los Angeles we go. In the video box, the image of TJ was replaced with a camera feed from the headset his henchman had given to me earlier. I knew this was my cue to look over at my target's house across the street. I rolled my window down low enough for the muzzle to stick out. TJ's henchman got out of his SUV and walked up the driveway. Apparently, the man I was assigned to kill was a night owl. All the lights in his house were on, and I swore that I could hear his TV blaring. Maybe he lived alone. The masked man rang the doorbell and stepped off to the side of the house to hide. A man arrived at the door. It was him, my target. Hello? Who's there? I heard him shout. He took a couple steps outside, and this was it. My moment of truth. I gathered every ounce of strength and fortitude that I could muster, and then I pulled the trigger. It was a direct hit right between the eyes. Raymond Marshall was dead before he hit the ground. The henchman emerged from the side of the house and walked up to the corpse and examined it. After doing so, he looked in my direction and gave some kind of hand gesture, presumably a signal of verification. Well, there you have it. Our friend did indeed have it in him to commit this murder, and since I am in a generous mood, I will not kill his cousin. I heard TJ say on my laptop. The henchman got back into his SUV and drove off into the night. I watched as he drove away, and I breathed a sigh of relief. But that relief was short-lived. I saw TJ walk off camera, and another one of his cronies walked into view, armed with a shotgun, and after a slight hesitation, he shot Lucy dead. I was in utter shock and disbelief. Even though I had done exactly what this monster had ordered me to do, and my cousin was still murdered, I had committed an act that I found to be reprehensible, and it was all for nothing. I spent the next 2 days sobbing in despair in my bedroom. My uncle called me and told me that he and my aunt had filed a missing persons report. They had tried to contact Lacey for several days, but couldn't get a hold of her. I feigned ignorance about what had happened because I just couldn't bring myself to tell them. I lay in my bed pondering what to do next. Those bastards had to be punished, but how? After all, one doesn't maintain a murder show on the dark web without being masterful at covering their tracks. But even the most careful criminals slip up eventually. Then I remembered something. The headset that I had worn that night. The one with the camera installed. Could it possibly still have a footage on it? Maybe not. They probably deleted it by now. But I decided that it was worth a shot. It's not like I had any other options. I hadn't taken computer lessons in a while, But I remember the basic hacking tricks Lacey had taught me. I put the headset next to my laptop and I went to work. It was a pain in the ass, but after several hours, I finally figured out how to hack into the camera. I expected to see nothing but a black screen. But to my surprise, I discovered a memory file in the camera. I clicked the file, and yes, footage from the murder. They had slipped up and forgotten to delete the memory. But that was only the starting point. I needed more if I was going to track him down. The henchman had his mask on the whole time, making it damn near impossible to identify him. The video reached the point where the henchman drove off, and I noticed something. There was a short moment where the vehicle passed under a bright street lamp before disappearing into the darkness. I saw a license plate, but the image quality was too blurry. I hacked in a little more to see if I could clear up the resolution. And it worked. The picture was now clear. It was a Nevada license plate. I was one step closer. I then typed the plate number into the database. The vehicle was a 2002 Toyota 4Runner, registered to a man named Zachary Parker of Reno, Nevada, about a 7-hour drive north. I was also able to acquire his address, and I was now on the trail of my cousin's killers. You're going down, TJ, and I'll make sure of that, even if it kills me. I packed food, rope, and duct tape, as well as a handgun that I used for home defense, and a hunting knife that I had brought with me when I moved out here. Before departing LA, I stopped at a local store to pick up mace and a taser gun. I was loaded and I was prepared to exact revenge against these psychopaths. I told my roommates that I was taking a short trip and that I would be back in a few days, but truthfully, I had no idea if I would be coming back at all. These were some bad characters that I was dealing with. I was expecting to lose my own life, but if I brought them down in the process, it would be worth it. I would prevent further deaths and avenge Lacey. I departed at about noon, but heavy traffic added another hour to my trip. I reached Reno at around 10 at night, and since I lacked familiarity with the area, it took me another hour to find the address of the SUV driver. Eventually, I arrived on a quiet street in a nice-looking neighborhood. It was a single-story, medium-sized house, similar in appearance to the one that I had grown up in over in Texas. There it was in the driveway, the black Toyota 4Runner with that same license plate number. I was a nervous wreck, and it took me several deep breaths to calm myself down. Eventually, I worked up enough courage, grabbed my duffel bag, and I stepped out of my truck. Slowly and quietly, I snuck up to the house, hoping against hope that nobody would notice me. Suddenly, the garage door began to open up. I ducked to the side of the house to keep myself out of sight. A man stepped out from the garage entrance and then climbed into the SUV to start it up. But he wasn't going anywhere. He simply moved his vehicle into the garage before shutting it off. I heard the sound of the vehicle door open and then shut again. This is where I took my chance. I bolted from my hiding spot and I snuck into the garage at the corner, using the SUV as a concealment. The man didn't notice me. He reclosed the garage door, shut off the light, and walked back into the house. I stayed crouched in the corner for another half hour, believing that he might be going to bed soon since it was late at night. Eventually, I made it to the door leading into the garage and opened it as quietly as I could. I had entered the laundry room, and there was another door which I also opened. I was now in a dark hallway. At the end was a bedroom with its door partially open and the light on. I heard the sound of a shower shutting off, and a few minutes later, I heard gargling noises. These were the longest few minutes of my life as I waited for the right moment to strike. I slowly crept down the dark hallway, careful not to make a sound, and I set down the duffel bag and pulled out my taser. I heard a slight creaking noise of the man sitting down on his bed. That's when I made my move. I burst through the bedroom door and shot the man in the chest with the taser gun. I made sure he was electrocuted for a good long time because I wanted him to suffer. Plus, I wanted to ensure that he wouldn't be able to fight back while I used my rope to bind him to his bedroom chair. Some time passed, and he had recovered from his disorientation. It took him a moment to realize that he was tied up, and he began shaking frantically. Then he looked up at me and let out a gasp. "What? What the hell are you doing here? How the hell did you find me?" "You got sloppy," I said bluntly. "Bet you never thought you'd see me again, did you?" He glared at me contemptuously. "Names and locations, dickface." "I'm not telling you shit," he said defiantly. "Fine, I got plenty of time. In the meantime, we're going to see how much you can take. See how tough you really are." He gulped nervously. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way, Zachary. Names!" "Go fuck yourself," he shouted. I pulled out my handgun and I shot him in his kneecap. He screamed like a banshee and I couldn't help but feel satisfaction at watching him suffer. "Not so tough when your victims fight back, are you? Start talking, asshole." "Go to hell." "Maybe I will, but I'm taking you bastards down with me." I then pulled out my pepper spray and I blasted him squarely in the face, which led to more screaming. I made sure he got a large dosage, and his eyes watered like a faucet and mucus began dripping out his nose. "Talk!" "You're getting nothing from me." "All right then. Looks like I need to up the ante." I reached once more into the duffel bag and I pulled out the hunting knife. Let's see. Your fingers, your toes, or your family jewels. He stared at me silently, sweating profusely. "I'll settle with the family jewels." I moved in closer and began to press the knife against his crotch. All right, I'll talk." I pulled back and smiled with satisfaction. I said, "That's more like it." He spilled the beans on the names and addresses of every one of his co-workers. He even gave the address of the abandoned warehouse where they hold their live streams. He said they were planning to have another show tomorrow night. As much as I hated this man, I didn't actually want to kill him. I would have preferred Zachary and his buddies be kept alive to suffer in prison forever. But I also couldn't take the chance that he would break free and warn his friends that I was trailing them. I pressed the gun to his temple, and then I pulled the trigger. A loud bang rang out, and I saw his head slump, oozing blood and brain matter onto the carpet. I stood there for a moment, watching Zachary's limp corpse. It was a lot for me to take in. Yes, he deserved it. I doubt anyone would argue otherwise. But this was still the first time that I had willingly taken a human life, and I felt a little overwhelmed. But I had to expunge that feeling. I couldn't afford to be a bleeding heart, not with these bastards, and I would have to be prepared to take more lives if necessary. Just then, I heard a whimpering noise, and it was coming from Zachary's closet. I pressed my ear against the door, and I could hear what sounded like a child crying. It was a heartbreaking sound. "Has this man been keeping you hostage?" I asked.
"Yes."
I heard the voice of a young boy respond from the other side of the door. "Don't worry, I'm gonna get you help." I looked around Zachary's bedroom and saw his cell phone on top of his nightstand. I used this phone to contact the police and inform them of the children being held captive. And eventually, I drove away from the house discreetly in the dead of night. Somehow, none of his neighbors heard anything. I spent the better part of the following day staking out the abandoned warehouse that Zachary told me about. I couldn't keep my mind focused on anything else except bringing these bastards down. And eventually, the sun began to set, and I decided to make the move on the factory. Whether TJ and his cronies had arrived or not, my truck was hidden in some bushes behind the building, so I was confident that they wouldn't spot it. I took the rear entrance, hoping it would draw less attention. I had my sniper rifle, a flashlight, a hunting knife, and a taser with me. If what I had seen from their live stream was any indication, they always came armed. I opened the back door slowly, but it still creaked loudly. I tried to maintain my bravado, but the creaking noise made me fear that I had alerted them to my presence. I chose to press forward despite my fears, my rifle pointed in front of me at all times. The factory was dim and quiet. Every little noise I heard made me shiver, but I wasn't going to turn back now. I had come too far down the tracks to abort at this point. There was a musty smell in the air, but it soon gave way to the smell of death. That I recognized it instantly. Spend as much time hunting wild hogs as I have, and you become very familiar with the smell of decaying flesh. I traced the stench to a door at the end of a hallway. I opened it, and I shined my flashlight into a pitch-black room. Sweeping the beam across, I saw a pile of dead bodies, some of whom were children. I then shone the light to the other side of the room, and I saw 3 people bound and gagged in a corner, a man and 2 women. Using my hunting knife, I cut the ropes binding them.
"Are you a cop?"
asked one of the female captives. "No, I'm just here to help," I replied. Then I pointed at the dead bodies. "Last night's victims?" "Yes, they haven't gotten around to burying them yet. They're running some kind of sick internet show here, and we were next in line," said the male captive. The other female hostage was too traumatized to speak, and I can say that I blame her. "You 3 get on out of here, and then head for the police station. We're shutting them down," I said. You sure you'll be okay?" the male hostage asked. "I'll be fine. Just don't tell them about me. Now go!" Without missing a beat, the trio bolted out of there and out of the rear entrance. I decided to leave the door to this room open, just to give them a shock when they arrived. I reached the main area of the factory. It was largely empty aside from a few desks, a computer with a webcam, and some extension cords. I noticed a step ladder leading up to the catwalk above. I decided this would be a good place to hide while I continued to wait for their arrival. But the wait would not be very long. Less than 10 minutes later, 4 men entered the building through the front door. They weren't wearing their mask and they were all armed with shotguns as expected. The leader was tall, lean, and had blonde hair. "Where the hell is Zachary? Have you been able to get a hold of him yet?" The blonde-haired man shouted in frustration, and I quickly deduced that this was TJ. "I've been trying to get a hold of him all day, but..." "But what?" "I drove by his house earlier today. The place was crawling with cops. When I asked a cop what happened, they said that he was found dead in his bedroom. Maybe someone found out about the kids that he was holding captive." TJ let out an exasperated sigh. Fine. We'll just have to do without him. I should have known bringing him on board was a mistake. He was always a little careless." "Oh, you have no idea, TJ." I quietly muttered to myself from my hiding spot, and TJ approached the desk with a computer and then turned it on. "Bring out those 3 hostages. We'll begin tonight's show in about half an hour." "You got it, boss," one of the other men said as he disappeared down the hallway. I readied my hunting rifle for my perch on the catwalk, and the moment of confrontation was arriving. TJ fiddled around on the computer for a bit when he suddenly heard a loud scream. "The hell was that?" TJ said. The henchman reappeared looking frantic and sweating. "The hostages! They're gone!" "What do you mean they're gone?" TJ asked incredulously. "They're gone! The storage room door was wide open and I walked in and they weren't there and the ropes had been cut." And I saw TJ face palming. "How the hell did..." Never mind. If those people somehow escaped, they're bringing the cops back here with them. We'd better leave now." I wasn't going to give them that chance. I aimed the rifle at the henchman's chest, and I fired. He yelped in pain and dropped to the floor. TJ and his 2 remaining accomplices began frantically looking around, hoping to find the person who shot their friend. One of them walked directly in front of my sightline, and I had a clear shot at the back of his head. I fired and watched his head split open, and he fell dead to the floor. Now, it was down to 2. The last of TJ's cronies rushed to his friend's side, and I blasted him in the right knee before shooting him once more in the head. But this victory was short-lived. I heard a gunshot ricochet behind me. TJ had spotted me. I got up and ran as fast as I could across the catwalk. I heard another gunshot, then another. He pumped the shotgun once more, but I heard a clicking noise when he pulled the trigger. Using this opportunity, I shot TJ twice in his left leg, and he was down like the rest of them. I climbed down from the nearest ladder to get back to the floor level. TJ was groaning in pain and holding on to his leg. I decided to have a little more fun as I approached him. I fired another round, this time into his shoulder. I took out the hunting knife and made an underhand toss. It landed in his right leg. And finally, I tased the bastard and made him squirm and flop like a fish on dry land. "Oh, how the mighty have fallen," I said smugly. And once TJ regained his composure, he looked up at me. "You! Surprised to see me, you son of a bitch? But how did... Wait, don't tell me. Zachary." "Like you said, he was a little careless, and this time, it came back to bite you in the ass." "You were the one who killed him." "He got what he deserved." "Alright, but what about Raymond Marshall's murder? You'll still go to prison for that." "No, I won't." Oh, really? And what makes you say that? Because you aren't going to say anything. I pointed the muzzle at his forehead. No, please, spare me. He sounded so pathetic. I saw a puddle from near his crotch. The bastard was pissing himself in fear. Spare you? Did you spare my cousin? Did you spare anyone who pleaded for mercy? No, you give no mercy, and you shall receive no mercy. I pulled the trigger and ended his life. All of them were dead now. The nightmare was over. I heard sirens approaching off in the distance. I quietly exited the factory and returned to my stakeout spot. I spent the next few hours in my truck watching the cops tape off the facility and the coroners removing the corpses of TJ and his cronies. More arrived in hazmat suits to remove the dead bodies that I had seen in the storage room. Eventually, they sent digging crews to excavate the remains of the victims that they had buried. It was during all this commotion that I was able to drive away unnoticed. It was a very long drive back to LA. I spent some of that time listening to the radio. The story was all over the news. When I heard reports about the men being eliminated by an unknown assailant with no available description, I knew the 3 hostages that I had cut loose had kept their promise. I was in the clear. Eventually, Lacey's remains were identified and my aunt and uncle received some much-needed closure. It's been a long time since that incident. Occasionally, I have thought about turning myself in for Raymond Marshall's death, but I always rationalized that his death was on their hands and that I was just an unwilling pawn. Take it from me. The deep web is a dark, despicable place. I will never go there ever again, and neither should you. Are there vampires on the dark web? I know, you think this might be a crazy topic, and I agree. I didn't believe it as well. A friend told me about a party she had gone to and told me about the strange happenings going on there. She said there were people drinking each other's blood like they were vampires, and that she let someone do it to her. She said it was simply erotic and started going back every weekend like it was some kind of drug calling her name. She told me the name of the place. It was French, something like Have de Sang. I'm not even sure if I'm saying that correctly, but I put it in Google Translate and it really means Blood Haven. I couldn't get much information out of her. Every week, she came back to college, looking a little less healthy than before. We only had one class together, so I assumed she was attending all of the others, and I'm sure other people noticed it as well. On the last day that I saw her, the dark circles under her eyes were extreme, and she was so pale. I could even see the blue veins under her skin very clearly. The professor asked her if she was okay, and she just smiled. It was then I noticed the left veneer fang in her mouth. I think it was a veneer. It had to be, because her teeth were pretty normal before that. "Are you okay?" I asked her when the professor excused the class. "Yeah, I'm fine. Why?" She answered with her breath reeking of copper and decay. "Are you still going to that club?" She leaned in closer to me and gave a glance to the professor before answering. "Yeah, now shh. No one can know about it." You look like shit, I said a little louder than expected. She smiled weakly, then grabbed her books and ran out of the classroom. I just shrugged and grabbed my books, and the professor gave me a glare before I left, and I think I heard him say as I walked out of the door, "Mind your own, Shell." That night, I went home and I decided to try and find what she was talking about. I tried to search for every version of Have It a Sang possible, and then, after learning it meant Blood Haven, I searched for that as well. After about an hour of no luck finding any such phrase at all, I decided to get my studies done for the week. I really didn't have a lot of time to spend sleeping, so I knew just the cure for my little fatigue problem. I opened my Tor browser and I clicked the link into the dark web to get some uppers that I've had a hard time finding on the surface web ever since they started keeping track of pharmacy sales. I'm not ADHD or anything like that, but the stuff really does help me stay awake to study for exams. I can't get it through a doctor because I'm not ADHD, but I can buy it with confidence from a certain hookup on the dark web. I normally only go to their sites, but I today came across a really strange banner at the bottom of their page. The banner read, "You don't need drugs to stay awake forever. TVC." A little too excited, I clicked on the link which took me to a black screen with deep red letters that resembled dripping blood. The query said, "Are you over 18? And I clicked yes. Another link popped up and said, "Are you a Fed?" Of course, I clicked no. Wouldn't they? Then, another button popped up with a text. "Click to enter, but do not tell anyone. You have been warned." I clicked the button and waited for about 30 seconds before the next window popped up. And this window was a bit disturbing. It was a picture of a naked woman and a man dressed in all black. He was looking directly at the camera while holding the woman close to him. Blood was dripping down her neck and off her breast and onto the floor. He was smiling, and blood dripped down from his bottom lip and from the two prominent fangs that protruded from his gums. There was no way this was real. There are no such things as vampires, but I went ahead and clicked the continue button anyway. A window popped up with the words that said, "Welcome, human," and a video started to play. There were people in a room dancing in what looked like blood squirting out from all small holes in the walls. From one corner, a young woman was pulled from a cage screaming. She tried to stand her ground, but the floor was so slick and wet that she horrifically slid along as a large man in a white blood-stained shirt and black pants pulled her through the crowd. As he passed the camera dragging her along, he gave one quick smile and then a wink. It was the man from the original picture. At first, he was very handsome, but as he passed, his eyes glowed red and his face snarled up like a hungry demon. He gave out one loud laugh as he pulled the woman to a large tank. She screamed as he yanked off her clothes like a tissue paper, and then he tossed them aside. For a moment he grabbed her and sunk his long enormous fangs into her jugular as she collapsed into his arms and began rubbing her blood-soaked body all over his. He held up his middle finger toward me with an incredibly long fingernail, then sliced her from neck down to her pelvis. As her guts began tumbling from her abdomen and blood gushed from her center, the other vampires, or whatever they were, circled around her and knelt down around her body to catch the blood now flowing in all directions. The man grabbed her intestines and held them toward the camera, laughing in victory and taking a large bite from them as her screams gurgled down into nothing. Then the camera flashed off and another of what I assumed would only be another actor appeared. "Did you like the show?" He looked straight at me through the lens. I felt warm inside, like he was actually looking at me. "I don't understand. This was a show?" I said dumbly into my screen, thinking he can actually answer me. And yet he did. "Oh yes, do you think we could actually get away with this?" Moments later, the woman who was torn apart came stumbling out of the other room and laughing with the other men. She was still naked, but completely clean, and the others had clothes on that still looked blood-stained. "Come, play." She cooed into the camera, then waltzed off into another doorway. The main vampire held up a business card, and I quickly snapped a picture with my phone. I don't know what was going on, but this was all an act, and a fun one at that, and I wanted to see what it was all about. "Tomorrow night at 11 p.m., be here. You must have $100 at the door, or you won't be able to get in," the man said, and then the screen went dark. Honestly, I couldn't sleep that night. I wondered what would happen if I actually did go to the location given to me on the card. All night, I tossed and turned thinking about it and wondering what it would be like to experience such a cosplay event. I decided the next night that I was going to grab $100 out of the ATM and head on over to that place. Why not? It was all fake, right? I went to the class the next day and then stopped by the bank after. Instead of only $100, I took out $400 and grabbed a cab to the next city over. I didn't know if there was going to be drinking involved or what, and leaving my car in the city downtown wasn't acceptable. Once there, I decided to get a hotel room and then some black hair dye and makeup at the drugstore. I also stopped by a thrift store and picked up some really cool clothes that made a great goth costume. And that afternoon at the hotel, I put together my masterpiece. Once I arrived around 10 to 11 p.m., they greedily took the 520s from my hand and stamped my arm with the stamp of the devil on the inside of my right wrist. I'm not sure what the significance of that was. I suppose so. It didn't get washed off if I went to the restroom. And as I entered the room, I noticed the walls were completely white and the floors were covered in dark red carpets. Tables lined the walls and the floor was bare, allowing for dancing. And the tank in the corner was empty. I went to the back and ordered some of the house's special red wine and found a seat at an empty table near the exit. I cringed as I tasted the wine. It was definitely wine, but had a strange coppery taste to it, like blood. I tried to act as if I enjoyed it, and as I consumed the contents of the glass, the light dimmed and people started coming out of the red curtains in the back. They were dressed in all black clothes that were really tight. Their eyes were black with red irises and lips stained red. One smiled at me, and his fangs protruded from the red slots of his lips. For a moment, I was lost in his gaze, until he looked away. It was unnerving to say the least. They all picked a partner to dance with, and he picked me. I stood, feeling a little woozy from what I supposed was the wine, and I began dancing with this strange man. He ran his hands up and down my body and pulled me close with his long arms, like snakes wrapped around my body. I felt his tongue against my neck and then burning, as his teeth pierced my skin. I wanted to scream, but something had a hold of my voice. As he continued to suck the blood from my neck, I fell into his arms. I remember there was screaming next. Another person was being dragged to the tank as they cuffed her feet and hung her upside down and lowered her into the pit. They cut her wrist and neck as the blood poured from her body and the remains were discarded. Then another after another was lowered into the tank upside down with their feet and discarded after their bodies were exsanguinated. I didn't know if it was real or not, nor did I care at that point. All I wanted was his lips upon my neck, and if so to read my mind, he just kept going. Soon, the tank was full, and the walls started spreading out the red liquid. It splashed on my face, and as I licked my lips, I knew it was blood. I fell into the stranger's arms, and I only remember him picking me up and bringing me to a room in the back where he removed my clothes and washed me off and covered me with a blanket. The next morning, my clothes were as clean as when I purchased them and sat next to my bed with a rose. "Come back soon. I want to taste you again," was written on the note. At this point, I have no idea if any of it was real or if they gave me drugs to make me hallucinate or what. I do know that I have 2 puncture wounds in my neck, and I am going back again tonight, for I am drawn to the place. I feel a little faint and felt the need to eat a lot of meat today. It seemed to give me a lot of strength and push me toward the door to another night at the Blood Haven. If you do see this online on the dark web, do not attempt to go there, for it will capture you, and you will not be free of its clutches. I hope they do not read this, for I do not know what will happen to me if it is found out that I told a secret to everyone. But I must warn you to not go there. That is all I will say as I'm putting on those goth clothes and getting ready to head out of the door. My friends say that I'm a little crazy, cruising around on the dark web like it's some place to hang out on my weekend nights. I used to have a social life with them, so I guess that they're just jealous. When I started college, we would all hang out together. But then I got really behind on some assignments, and these weren't just some assignments that I could just do overnight. It was almost the end of the semester, and I was complaining in a forum somewhere that I hadn't read any of the material and that I didn't know what was really going on. That's when a guy on the forum named The Jester spoke up. He messaged me privately and said that I could probably buy those papers off the dark web if I have the money. I was curious to see what he was talking about, so I downloaded the app and I started visiting the websites that he sent to me. I'm going to be honest here. I would have never found these sites without his help because their links are insanely stupid. These were mostly scanned images of other people's homework. Some were only a few bucks and others were in the thousands. I didn't have thousands, so I bought a few papers that cost me between $5 to a couple of $100 each. I figured that I could take pieces of the best ones and put them together. I'd spend all night reading them and then work out something in the morning. I went through most of them and I took notes. They were really well written, and I was surprised to find out how easy it was to actually cheat on a paper using other people's work. I wasn't plagiarizing the material, but using them as reference points. I didn't feel like reading 3 whole months of text just to pick out the information for the assignment. If I could pull it off, then this would be good enough. A couple of the pieces were nonsense garbage though. They really weren't that expensive and it didn't matter. It wasn't until the last one where I found myself wondering what the hell I had gotten myself into. I opened up the page, and it had hand-drawn sketches of adults and kids. They were naked, but they weren't explicit. At first, I wasn't sure what I was looking at and thought it might be some medical journal. But then I realized that it was a butcher's diagram of meat cuts. The pages looked used, like they had been read many times and even used in a greasy environment. I read the descriptions and almost lost my dinner. There were recipes for some of the most popular dishes we all know and love, which included anything from sizzling steaks to stuffed mushrooms and lasagna. They talked about how to get the most tender pieces and where and from whom to get the cuts. There were pictures of the carving knives and pans to use. And at the end of the booklet, which was obviously pieced together by taking pictures with a camera and putting together in one big JPG, there was a link to submit your own recipes. A freaking link. I don't know how I managed to download this horrible monstrosity of a link, but I pray nothing was sent back to these people. I don't know what to do or where to get rid of it. Do I send it to the cops? The feds? Have I done something illegal myself? I hope that it didn't send these creeps my IP address. The dark web is without a doubt the worst thing to ever happen to the internet. I used to think it was cool, a place to see all the weird and illegal shit. Well, that was until I joined in on a stream. From what I could tell, it was an auction. And as I joined, I saw the face of a person alongside some info about them, like their name, age, location, health, and credit score. How they managed to get this info was beyond me. I was tempted to chat, but I realized that there was no chat, only bidding channels. Probably for the best, as I shouldn't be talking here. So I'm not sure what the bidding was for, but I could tell that it was for this person. Maybe their info? I looked at the tag for the health and thought again. I don't think it was an organ trade either, from what I could tell, because the credit score doesn't matter in terms of how good your kidneys are. The person in question was a middle-aged woman, a little bit on the chubby and wrinkly side. Decent credit, but not too good health-wise. And her name was Karen Waller, age 47, from Minnesota. I looked at the bids and they were in the thousands. Definitely not just for their info. The prices were pretty high, and at the bid of $28,000, the woman was sold. The announcer thanked all of the bidders and announced the next bid of merchandise to be sold. As I watched the next person for sale, I was surprised. It was my cousin Daniel. He was a freshman in university. How the hell did his name end up here? I stared in shock by the revelation, only to be woken from my thoughts by a notification. The bidding has started. $5,000, $7,000, $10,000, $15,000. I looked for my card, hoping to outbid everyone to keep my cousin safe. But as the bidding increased, it went out of my price range. Even if I start selling my belongings and I took a loan, I'm not sure if I could outbid them. The bidding started to slow down at $30,000, and I could feel my heartbeat as each new bid slowly came up. I watched in horror as it went to $32,000, $33,000, $35,000, and then it climbed to $37,000. The auctioneer waited for more bids as my heart hammered in my chest. Going once? My God, this was it. Going twice. My cousin, who I've known since he was a baby, gone. And I could feel tears streaming down my face as the auctioneer yelled, "Sold!" with a gleeful tone, as if he wasn't profiting off the despair and pain of others. What kind of sick person was he? Disgusted and scared, I clicked off the site and I called my cousin. It was 3 a.m. at that point, but I didn't care. I just needed to hear his voice and know he was okay. I called, and I heard the tone ringing. Once, twice, 3 times, nothing. I let it keep ringing until it reached voicemail. I hung up and I tried again, still no answer. I tried a few more times, getting more panicked with each attempt. I was on the verge of tears as the tone rang again, but this time, I was met with an answer. Hello? It was my cousin. He sounded both tired and grumpy. What's the matter? I was choking on my words between the hurricane of emotions and being unsure of what to say. I couldn't form a proper sentence. But I pushed on, and I had to at least warn him about what I saw. My cousin, hearing my sobs, asked if I was okay. I couldn't explain to him what it was, but I did warn him to be careful and ask if he was okay. But I made him promise that he would be careful. I wish I did more. I should have done more. And 2 weeks after that, my cousin went missing and presumed dead. It's been 2 years. I still don't know what the auction was about, but I know that it costed me my cousin. I will never go back onto the dark web again. I'll be haunted by what I saw on it for the rest of my life. I used to go onto the dark web a few years back just for the thrill of it. I didn't really do anything on there. Just being on it made me feel like I was in on a secret. After all, it was a place where nothing was off the table, no matter how illegal it normally is. But after a week or two, the initial thrill of it wore off, and my curiosity started to outgrow my sense of caution. I began peeking into websites and links to really see what was out there. Of course, I used a VPN and other security measures to keep myself as safe as I could. But I was aware of the risk of snooping around the dark web. Or, at least, I thought I knew the risk. The threat of my information being leaked or my computer getting hacked was always something I knew could happen. But I never really thought about other ways the dark web can mess with you. Over the few days of me looking around, I came across a stream of a guy sitting in a chair with another dude behind him. The camera cut out at about the torso of the standing guy, so we really couldn't see his face. The guy who was sitting had grayish-brown hair, an unkempt beard, and looked severely underweight. You could almost see his skeletal structure because of how thin he was. I thought that the stream was just odd, and I was about to leave when there was a super chat. It was $200 with a message and just an emoji of a gun. Confused, I looked at the chat, and it was mostly incoherent. A lot of it wasn't in English, but what I could understand is that they were all talking about weapons. I noticed a poll that had 4 options: assault rifle, axe, spike bat, and electric chair. Electric chair? That's not a weapon. I thought to myself. And at that moment, I realized what this stream was truly about and what the super chats actually were. Those weren't super chats, they were bits, and that poll wasn't just for conversation. These people were bidding on how to end this man's life. I was hit with a wave of emotions, fear, disgust, morbid curiosity, and then guilt. Alongside them was the overwhelming desire to leave. And just then, the bidding had reached its end. Axe was the winning choice. As the man in the background moved to get the axe, I hovered my mouse over the X button to get out of there. And just as I was about to leave, a large wood axe came onto the screen. I looked at it in horror as it was hefted into the air, and I clicked the X just as he brought the axe down towards his head. And for a brief moment, it was 1/10 of a second long, but it will replay in my mind till I die. In the few frames between when I clicked the X button and when the browser closed, I saw it. The axe cleaving into the man's head, the blood coming out of his skull, and the facial expression he had as he died. I saw it all, and I'll never stop seeing it in my mind. Every time that I close my eyes, I saw something normal people were never meant to see, and it scarred me for life. Don't end up like me. Don't go poking around on the dark web. This happened a few years ago. It was a weekend, so I thought I'd catch up on playing League of Legends since I was too busy to play that week. It was going poorly and we were getting our ass kicked. On top of it all, our Draven was super toxic the entire game. After losing, he continued to berate everyone in the post-game chat. Well, that was when I had enough of it, and I told him to shut up, because he was just being an asshole. He was silent for a few minutes, so I assumed that it had worked. However, just as I was about to queue up for another match, he replied again in the chat box. His reply was my address. With his threat understood, I backed off, not wanting to mess with him at that point. However, I wasn't a stranger to hackers. I frequented the dark web and had a few friends on there. So I screenshotted his name and ID, and I popped onto the dark web to see if I could get a little payback. I then checked in with one of my acquaintances, a hacker that went by the handle of Jericho. I sent him a message saying hi and that I wanted a favor from him. Jericho isn't the type of person to beat around the bush or make some small talk. So if you want something from him, it's best to spit it out from the get-go. What do you need? His reply was within minutes of my message. Well, I told him the situation and about how I wanted to get back at him. Maybe just scare him a bit by doing the same thing he did to me, I suggested. Freaking him out the same way he threatened me sounded like good karma in my books. All right, Jericho responded. I'm pretty sure I can do that. What's his ID? I showed him the screenshot. ICP fan, number NA9. There was a long pause before Jericho's next message. Interesting. What? I asked curiously. That's not a normal ID. There's usually a long string of letters and numbers. Is that bad? I replied, a little bit nervous. Probably not. If anything, he might be a dev, but I can still do it. I smiled to myself. Thanks, man. How much is it gonna cost me? I'll do it for 100. Deal? I winced. I seriously doubted that it was a fair price, but I have already gone far at this point, and I certainly wasn't going to piss Jericho off by haggling or calling things off. So I agreed, whilst I yearned for my wallet. With the transactions done, Jericho told me that he would have it done by tomorrow, and that he would take a short screen capture video of it so I can see the proof. And then he logged off for the night. I woke up the next morning feeling tired, probably due to staying up late on the dark web, but I didn't mind if it meant that that asshole was getting the scare of his life. After a long day at work, I came home to check my messages and see if Jericho sent the video yet. Nothing so far. Thinking nothing of it, just that he was taking his time, and I just went on about my day. Later that night, I checked again. Nothing. At this point, I was wondering what took him so long. So I sent him a message asking about his progress with the job. No reply. At this point, I was starting to get annoyed. Did he scam me? Did he just take my 100 and then disappear? It's the dark web, so it's not like I could do anything about it. I kept telling myself otherwise, trying to remain calm. Jericho wasn't that type of guy. Was he, though? I'd known him for what? A month? Via chatting anonymously on the dark web. But what did I really know about him? I watched as the time passed. Soon it reached midnight. Jericho missed his deadline, and just as I was about to close my laptop in frustration for being so stupid, I got a notification. A message from Jericho. I checked to see, and it was a 2-minute video. I smiled. I guess he didn't rip me off after all. I thought as I clicked on the video. And this clip was $100, so I'm gonna do my best to enjoy it. Or so I thought. The video was of a man tied up to a chair. He looked bloody and bruised, surrounded by men with ski masks. A paper was taped to the bleeding man's chest with the name Jericho on it. "Hey, asshole," one of the masked men said. I gasped in horror, putting 2 and 2 together. "Let this be a lesson to you." He raised what looked like to be a gun to Jericho's head. "Don't mess with ICP, fan." And with that, the gun went off. I didn't see a bullet, but I saw parts of Jericho's head being splattered on the other side of the gun alongside the bang. And with that, the men just left, leaving nothing but the corpse of the man that I hired sitting in its chair. The rest of the video was just that. After what felt like eons, the video ended. I just stared at the blank screen, the replay button in the center terrorizing me. And the screen finally turned off. This was enough to snap me out of my trance. I had just witnessed the man die. No, it was worse than that. I sent that man to his death. I then thought again about the warning from the ski man people. I don't know who ICP fan is, but I want nothing to do with them or the dark web ever again. I also stopped playing League of Legends after that too, but I wanted to get back into it after writing this, but it appears that my account has been perma-banned. It was just another boring Saturday when I decided to surf the dark web. Looking through things to do, I found a website that will let you sell anything. And I mean anything. Browsing through it, I saw things from guns to drugs to exotic animals, along with less interesting things as well, but mostly things that you couldn't easily buy normally on the internet. It was kind of Craigslist. Given that, it allows anyone to post an ad for anything that they wanted to sell. Given the fact that I had nothing to do, I decided to make an ad of my own. The only thing was, what would I sell? I honestly didn't want to sell anything. So I decided inside to listen to my intrusive thoughts and make a joke ad. Believe it or not, a lot of people on the dark web had a good sense of humor. So I made an ad for these nuts. This would probably give someone a good chuckle. Finishing the ad, I browsed around for a while on the web before heading off to bed and just forgetting about it. After a few days of nothing, I received a message from an anonymous account. They said, "Do you do shipping and handling?" I nearly died laughing. I'm glad someone decided to play along with the joke. And with a large grin, I replied, "Nah, you gotta ship and handle these nuts yourself. As a bonus, you can see the quality of them yourself." The reply was instant. "No need, but I will be willing to handle shipping and handling for the stated price." Still laughing, I messaged him back saying, "Alright, whatever you want then, come and get 'em." After seeing his reply of, "I'm on my way," I put my phone in my pocket. It was just a fun gag, but I'm pretty sure that it was done now, and with a jump in my step, I continued about my week. Well, that was until I received another message from the same person. "I'm outside your home. You did not have a listed business address, so I hope this is okay." I was about to reply again with another smart-ass response, but as I looked out my window, I noticed a black car parked right outside of my driveway. I then got a notification on my phone. It was from my bank. It was a sum of $420.69, and it was deposited into my bank account. I stood there, looking at my phone, completely stunned, when another message appeared on my screen. "I was unable to find a business account for you, so I sent the payment to your personal. May I ask, when am I receiving the testicles? I already paid for it, and as you said, I am willing to handle shipping. I assume the organ is ready for shipment?" I'll be honest here. I was scared. I didn't put my address or my banking information on the ad. I had zero idea how he found me, but what really dawned on me was that I had no idea who he was. This wasn't a joke anymore, and I could just see how real the situation had become. I tried to reason with the man, hoping that he would leave me be. However, I was met with zero compassion. "Hey, sorry to be the one to tell you this, but that ad was a joke, man. I'm not really selling my balls. I'll give you your money back and then we'll be square, okay?" The man's reply was terrifying. "Whether you are intending to sell them or not is irrelevant. We made a deal in response to your ad, and I flew 2 hours to get here. A simple refund won't suffice. I demand my product, or currency in value to the time and the resources that I spent because of your false ad." I could tell a shakedown when I saw one. I knew that the only way to get him to leave me alone was to pay him, or maybe calling the cops. And while the latter option did sound reasonable, given the circumstances I was in, I'm not entirely sure if they would even help me, since this is technically an organ trade gone wrong, which is very much illegal. Weighing my options between jail, losing my nuts, and paying this guy money, I decided that I would at least see if I could negotiate with him. So how much do I need to pay you? I felt like shit as I typed that, knowing that I was basically being robbed with extra steps. I would say about $3,000 would be enough compensation for the trouble that you've caused me, as well as a full refund of my money. I let out a sigh. Well, at least, it's not some super high ridiculous amount that I would have to take a loan for. And feeling completely defeated, I sent him the money through the same account that he used to pay me. And once I had, he sent me another text. A pleasure doing business with you, but fair warning, never waste my time again. I won't take no for an answer a second time. And with that, the car drove off, and I was left by myself once again. And after an extreme anxiety attack, I took the ad down. I had always heard about the dark web and thought that it was a place for hackers and criminals. But after finding out that one of my friends occasionally browsed on it, I'll admit, I got curious. And after learning about it from him and how to be safe on there, I downloaded Tor and made my way into a new online world. And while I wasn't a big fan of all the illegal things on there, I did find the people interesting. I'm a psychology major, so seeing a place where people can be both anonymous and free of law made me fascinated by the kinds of people that would be on there. So, with that in mind, I decided that I wanted to interact with the people on the dark web. And after a bit of searching, I found what I was looking for. It was a chat room kind of site, a lot like Omegle, where you were matched with people randomly. There was an option to turn your camera on, but I chose not to. And while I'm crazy enough to be on the dark web to meet people, I'm not going to put my face out there for no reason. After a few hours, I was kind of disappointed. Most of them were either boring or were obviously trying to scam or hack me. So after countless skips to a new conversation, I was beginning to lose hope in finding anything interesting. That is, until I was matched with a person wearing a white mask. The word God was written on the mask forehead in a black marker. Oh, this is gonna be good, I thought to myself. Not only had this woman turned her camera on and wore a weird mask, it was clear that she was trying to scare me. I smiled to myself as I said, "Hello," in the friendliest tone possible. The woman simply cocked her head to the side before saying in a monotone voice, "Do you want to play a game?" A Saw reference? Really? Okay, I said, "Why not?" And after saying that, her screen went black. I was still connected to the call and the camera was still on her side, but it was as if her room itself had gone pitch black. I could hear some shuffling in the background, followed by a metal scraping sound. I was both curious and a little anxious as to what she had planned for me. And after a few minutes, the lights came back on in her room. There the woman stood, directly in front of the camera, her mask still on, but now I could see her full body. She wore a black hoodie with a hood up to cover her hair and some jeans, and if not for her voice and figure, it would be hard to tell if she was a girl or a guy. She spoke to me, saying, "I will give you 3 options," before pulling a knife from her pocket, as well as a metal bat and a crowbar, which she pulled from out of screen. They must have been lying on her table, just out of view from the camera the entire time. "Which of these would you choose to end this man's life?" She stepped to the side, revealing a person with a black bag over their head. They were tied to a chair, seemingly unconscious. The woman stood there expectantly and waited. Did she really want me to choose? I started to panic. This was not what I signed up for. I just wanted to talk to a crazy lady who wrote the word God on her mask and wore it. At that moment, I understood why she had that mask on. She saw herself as master over life and death. This man's life was hers to play with and to do with as she pleases. And to prove that point, she's doing this, letting some random person on the internet decide how he dies. No, I refuse to be part of this heinous act. I skipped the chat and then I closed the application before the next person could connect. I had had enough of the dark web for today and for every other day in the future. Looking back, I can't help but feel regret over the situation. I keep thinking about the man that she had tied up. What had happened to him? I feel guilty for not helping and terrified of what she did to him next. I was surfing the dark web, not sure what to do on a Friday afternoon. Seeing as there was nothing better to do, I clicked on a stream. As the stream loaded, I was greeted with cheering. "Congratulations, you're our lucky winner," the streamer said. Confused, I waited to see what he would say next. "You've won an air conditioner." What the hell? The rest of the chat seemed to be very excited about this. Being obviously weirded out by this, I typed in the chat, "No thank you." And I said that I didn't want his air conditioner. The streamer chuckled and then said, "Well, okay then, if you say so." I left the chat not long after, and I spent the rest of the night watching YouTube. I had mostly forgotten about the weird interaction on the dark web until a few weeks later, when a large package arrived at my apartment door. It was a portable air conditioner. At first, I was confused until I remembered the streamer. Shit, how did he get my address? I was a little panicked, which the delivery man seemed to pick up on. You okay, man?" I took a moment to breathe and process things. All in all, while it was concerning that some dark web guy knows my address, he used that info to send me an air conditioner. And given that it was hotter than Satan's armpit in my small apartment, who am I to look a gift horse in the mouth? So, opening it up, I could tell that it was used. But whatever, free is free, right? I plugged it in, and I felt the cold air hit me. I was enjoying the coldness for an entire second, until a terrible smell reached my nose. It was rancid, and it was coming from the AC. I turned it off, and then I got a screwdriver. I decided to take a look inside to see what was wrong and why it smelled like that. Opening the air conditioner, I had to hold back my gags. Looking inside, there was a small cardboard box taped to one of the walls of the AC. The box had a smiley face drawn on it with a red marker along with a small note. Despite every cell in my body telling me just to leave it alone and then throw the AC out, I was determined to find out what the hell was making that smell and then to get it out of my house. However, I didn't want to touch it with my bare hands, so I left to go get a rubber glove. Returning, I hesitantly reached out and grabbed the note, gagging as I did because of the smell. Pulling it back and then holding it far from my face, I opened it. The note was also in red marker, simply saying, "I got you an extra present alongside your air conditioner. Enjoy!" With an exclamation point at the end, I threw the note into the trash and then prepared myself to open the box. Seeing as how I nearly puked just by being near it, I knew that I needed a mask if I was going to open it. Now, face mask, bottle of air freshener, and a pair of rubber gloves, I reached in and I detached the box from the air conditioner. The box was about the size of my hand. The tape, which had been used to both seal the box and also stick it to the air conditioner, was torn, leaving the box slightly open. I pulled back from the AC and I stood up before moving away from the machine and looking down at the box. Even with the mask, it smelled awful, like mold, trash, rotten meat, and any other horrid odor you could think of. But curiosity got the better of me. So once I was holding it on top of my trash can, I pulled back the tape and peeked inside. I instantly dropped the box and fell back. Feeling sick, I ran to the toilet, ripped off my mask, and I threw up so much that my stomach was aching. And once I was completely empty, I ventured back to the trash can and I peered back to check if what I saw earlier was indeed correct. Inside my trash can, on top of tissues, takeout containers, and crunched up papers, was a molded, rotted finger. I felt sick, but this time I had nothing to puke up, so I retched as I ran back to the kitchen. Grabbing a trash bag, I put my whole trash can inside of it and I tied it multiple times before walking outside to the dumpster and throwing everything out, trash can and all, into it. I then went back to my room and sprayed disinfectant everywhere. As I sprayed, I looked at the air conditioner, disgusted by it. I pushed and I started to move it, and then something small fell out of it. Slightly afraid of what it could be, I looked down to see a tiny camera. I stared at it and I saw a green light flicker. It was on. Needless to say, it also joined my trash can and the AC in the dumpster. Don't get things from the dark web, even if they are free. While you might think it to be the lamest thing that you can do on the dark web, I personally enjoyed using the chat rooms on it to talk to the strangest people that the internet had to offer. It was kind of fun to see who would be my next chatting partner. A lot of the time, it was almost cathartic to talk to the scariest people on the web, but you would be surprised by just how many of them are just regular people who just know a bit more about technology. Knowing this makes things less scary online, but that's not always the case. There was this one girl on the dark web who I would classify as the exact opposite of that. I had just left the last chat. I was kind of bored, and the guy I was talking to was being way too nosy and asking all kinds of personal questions that I didn't want to answer. So I just moved on to another chat room. And that's where I met her. User Lindsay504. I immediately thought that she was new to the dark web. I mean, she put her real name into her username. Anyone with common sense knows not to do that. But regardless, I enjoyed chatting with her quite a bit. And after a week of chatting, I gave her my Discord, and we would occasionally chat through there. I learned that Lindsay wasn't actually her name, and that she was pretty good with technology. She even bought me Elden Ring on Steam when it first came out, after I just mentioned it in passing. I was flabbergasted, and I tried to decline, but she refused to take any answer but a yes. I really couldn't afford to buy anything remotely as expensive, given my low-paying job, despite how hard my boss works me. And again, just like he usually does, he gave me an extra assignment to do by Monday, meaning that I would have to spend my entire weekend just working on it to get it done. Feeling stressed, I decided to surf the web until I got a message from Lindsay. She asked how I was today, and given that I'd just been given the mother load of all work for this weekend, I ended up venting to her about it. I ranted to her about how bullshit it was and how my boss was a greedy asshole. And she agreed with me and said that I needed a break. I said, "Yeah, I'd love a break if only the universe was so kind." And she answered, "Say no more. Just sit tight. I already sent someone over to pick you up." At this point, I wasn't surprised she had a private driver, given how much money she spends, but I was worried for multiple reasons. A, asking me to come over to her house so suddenly was just insane, as I've never actually met her. And B, she didn't wait for me to agree. And C, I never gave her my address. I was about to argue any of these points, however, she went offline before I could get a word out. I stood there, a bit confused as what to do now, so I simply went back to work on my project. I was about a quarter of the way through when my doorbell rang. Getting up from my desk, I realized what this might be, and as I answered the door, I realized that my suspicion was correct. I was greeted with a middle-aged African-American man with a shaved head. He was wearing a suit and gave a small bow before asking me if I was finished packing. I told him that I didn't pack anything as I didn't intend on going. The man shook his head and then pulled out his cell phone. He rang for someone who quickly answered and then informed them that I wasn't coming. Then the man nodded before handing the phone to me. "She wants to talk to you," he said as he put the phone in my hands and took a step back. And with the phone in my hand, I could feel my heart beating in my chest. All I had to do was say no, so why was I so nervous? I steeled myself in the moment and put the phone to my ear. "Hello?" I said. "Hi, Eric," said the cheery voice on the other side. "Martin said that you haven't packed yet, but that's okay. I'm sure you and my brother are the same size, so you can just borrow some of his clothes." I had always been nervous about talking to girls, but telling one no? That's even harder to do. Then I remembered that I never gave her my real name, and I reminded myself that I didn't give her my address either. "How do you know so much about me?" I ask, only to hear her giggle a bit on the other end of the phone. You told me, silly. Now, I was scared. I assumed that maybe one of my accounts was linked to Facebook or something, but I was sure that I never told her my real name or where I was. Was she trying to gaslight me? The red flags from before were crimson at this point, so I really couldn't do anything but tell her no. I'm not going over to your house, I said abruptly. I was met with a long silence, and the tension in the air was palpable while I waited for her reply. Why not? Her tone had lost its cheery demeanor and became creepily hollow. I don't know you that well, and I never told you any of my personal information. I'm not comfortable getting in a car with a complete stranger to meet another stranger. Again, silence. And after 5 agonizing seconds, she replied with a short, "I see," before hanging up the call. She sounded hurt by my words, and I certainly felt like an asshole for saying them, but I felt like I made the right choice. I handed the phone back to the man and then told him that she hung up. He nodded and took the phone before leaving, getting into his black Cadillac and then driving off. I never heard from her again, and while I assumed that that would be the last time that I would see or hear from her and her driver again, I was mistaken. About a year later, I was watching the news about a huge arrest on a human trafficking group, and as they showed the mugshots of the men arrested, I felt my blood grow cold. One of the men there looked identical to the driver who tried to take me to Lindsay's place. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.